All right. Well, I'm going to assume it can see me. Um, Talking about bureaucracy. Can you all see the slide? I just need a thumbs up. All right, that's a nod.
Yeah.
Literally rule by desk. I think of like Russian nesting dolls, which are this. If you don't know what they are, they're like little toys. They're like little wooden dolls with a doll and a doll and a doll and a doll. Bureaucracy is literally that. um, they are professionals and it's organized in a hierarchy. There's always someone else in charge of someone else monitoring something. And these vague descriptions will refine as we go on. Um, they are, everyone has their own specific job. They all have their own responsibility, and their positions are supposed to be merit based. So the people at the head of these organizations and these departments are going to be appointed by like the president, but all the people that work for them, they have to pass a civil service test. Um, if you're planning on going into the military, you had to take like the ASVAB, like which is a merit test to see like what positions you qualify for. People who work in the government have to take a very similar test to qualify them for certain roles. You can't just become a diplomat. You have to take a test, and they'll put you where you qualify. So just a frame of reference, and this is an older statistic. Um, this is from about 4 years ago when I taught this class while I was in college. Um, there are over 20 million people now who work for the government within the bureaucracy. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. So like when we talk about cutting like the bureaucracy and like Donald Trump talked about draining the swamp, we're talking about the jobs and livelihoods of over 20 million people. Um, Bureaucracy or how laws realistically happen. We all talked about how Congress makes laws, right? Those of you on mute, you got to at least raise your hand, hit the raise your hand button when you're like, yeah, that makes sense. There you go. Congress makes laws, and then we say the president enforces them, and bureaucracy is how they do that. It's not like the president goes around and like makes sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to do. That would be insane. So if Congress passes a law that says we'll use healthcare, that says there's going to be a national health service, the president would be responsible for creating the administration that ran that. So they would create the offices and appoint people to be in charge of it, to hire people to run it. And so like they would be like the CEO of everything. Um, Bureaucracy is a lot of the times going to be the regulations. They're the rule setters. They're the regulators. Um, all of the bureaucracy, except for a few things we'll talk about, fit into one of 15 cabinet departments. These are they're called secretaries. They have to be approved by the Senate. This is the presidential cabinet. These are the president's advisors. And so he appoints them, the Senate approves them. I'm sorry, this is a boring slide. I don't know why this slide is white. I added no color to it, and I just don't know why. I'm so sorry. But each department is considered to be an expert in their own area. They're all given a budget by Congress, and they all answer to the president. Um, like I said before, this is how the president enforces laws. He can appoint and remove agencies. He has a lot of power here. This is like when he issues executive orders, a president's executive order only affects his branch of government. So he can control the bureaucracy. So like different agencies, so like ICE or immigration control or FEMA for natural disaster relief, all that answers to him. So he can control it once Congress has created it. So who are these people? What do they do? And I'm going to go quickly through these, otherwise we'll be here forever, and I don't want that. But be paying attention and be thinking about which of these are more important. The order I go through these is the order they were created. So after like the vice president and the speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate, this is the order of presidential succession. in the event of like a horrific crisis of America. So, Secretary of State handles all of America's foreign policy. They negotiate treaties, and they represent the United States to the world. Um, this is where our foreign policy comes from. These are all of our diplomats. One of your vocab words. Treasury, I think it speaks for itself. They control our national finances. They collect taxes. They control our debt. They are supposed to control inflation. They print money. They keep up with all the money stuffs. Feel free to stop me, guys, at any point, please, if I'm going too fast. Department of Defense is the military. Up until World War II, it was the Department of War. They're in charge of the military, guys. That one's, I feel like, pretty simple. The Department of Justice, or the DOJ, as most people like to call it, they're special because their leader is not a secretary. They're called the Attorney General. And essentially the only reason for that being that's what George Washington decided to call them. And since George Washington did it, we still do it. A lot of things we do are simply because George Washington did it. There's not like a special reason. So Secretary of the Department of Justice is the Attorney General because they're special. They handle all of our legal affairs. They're in charge of the police and for prisons. They also control like firearms and tobacco and whatnot, which makes them a really like the DEA. So like as a police force answers to them. Bye, Ben. You gonna come? Someone text him, tell him to come back. Hey, he's back. Ben, did you die?
No, my Wi-Fi went out and then I couldn't see the screen, so I had to leave it.
Oh, it'd be like that. It'd be like that. All right, now we get into the obscure ones. So those first few were like Washington's foreign advisors. The next ones happened in the 19th century. You get the Department of the Interior. They can protect like national parks, all of our rivers and mountains. They also handle relations with the Native Americans. So like they control the Indian reservations and Indian schools. They're responsible for anything involving that. Agriculture, again, a lot of these, the names, I feel like give it away. They're responsible for all of the food. We are the second largest, we are the largest food producing nation in the world. So if we mess up organizing our food production, we screw the entire world, essentially. We produce over a third of the world's food supply. A third of the population of the planet relies on the U.S. food. So their biggest thing is conservation and making sure that we'll be able to keep producing food. That's 100% all they do. Commerce regulates business to make sure that the economy is doing well. It's pretty straightforward. They are also in charge of the census and making sure that people are counted properly, which means that they control how each state is represented in Congress, like how much representation does each state get. So they can, every 10 years, they became super important. Labor, this is like where OSHA comes from. This is, they make sure like we all have jobs and that we're all safe while we're doing it, and they don't let children work and whatnot. Health and Human Services run hospitals, Medicare, Medicaid, Health Department. Housing and Urban Development, make sure we all have like good housing. Their job is to prevent homelessness and to make sure we all have access to safe living conditions. Transportation, they're in charge of like interstates and air travel. So like if you don't want planes running into each other, air traffic control or interstate construction, our favorite thing, is run by them. They also control things like trains and whatnot, but mostly we care about interstates and planes. Energy makes sure we have power. They run our entire nuclear program. That includes the nuclear stuff that goes to the military for bombs. They're in charge of research and development, so like solar power and wind power, water power, that's all them. Also the Human Genome Project and research into that field. So they have a lot to do with like medicine, which seems a little bit out of their jurisdiction, but I don't make the rules, man. Uh, Department of Education, you are a part of that. I work for them. They, my boss's 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 boss. And they control like student loans and stuff and make sure we all have good schools. Veterans Affairs is like the VA. Homeland Security is the newest one, and they have like the most stuff that they do. Border security, immigration, cybersecurity, natural disaster prevention, and general disaster prevention and management. They were also responsible for making sure like all of the other departments talk to each other and communicate more clearly. They were also charged with reducing bureaucracy. However, they in turn tripled the size of the bureaucratic system. And they are the newest. So the Secretary of Homeland Security is last in line to become president. Which, in the event of a super crisis where we're like at like number 6 in the succession, I really feel like Homeland Security might be more qualified than like the Department of Agriculture. But again, I don't make the rules. So there you have it, all 15 cabinet positions in as minimal time as possible. We love to make subcommittees on committees. The Intelligence Committee is a part of the Senate. It's like the CIA answers to the Intelligence Committee. So like when Kamala Harris said she was qualified to be vice president because she was chair of the Intelligence Committee, that meant she was in charge of like the CIA. But then they could make a subcommittee that monitors the NSA to make sure the NSA is not doing anything crazy, like wiretapping everybody. But then we're like, man, are they actually effective at doing their job? We just found out the NSA is wiretapping everybody like 2 weeks ago. So let's make a new subcommittee, the super subcommittee, to monitor the monitors of the NSA. And if they have issues, we'll make a subcommittee that monitors the committee that monitors the committee that monitors the NSA. And it gets absurd after a second, right? Does it not seem a little bit absurd? It makes sense, but it's absurd. Yeah. I just want you to keep thinking about this, like what is the most important, what isn't. Please take my warning seriously. The next slide is chaotic. It's a flow chart that does not flow. What? So here's can you all see my mouse? This is the president. Each of these big bold boxes are the 15 departments, the cabinet positions. And then under them are all of the offices that fall under their control. These offices are not under any of their control. They are congressional offices that the president oversees, and we'll talk about those in a second. And yeah, I think UPS is not UPS, but like the post office is on here, and they're the Marines. The U.S. Army falls under the Defense Department. One I want to point out, which is super unique, because you all know I love the TV show. This is NCIS, and they fall under like the Marine Corps, which falls under Secretary of the Navy, which falls under the Department of Defense, but they're also controlled by outside the military so that they're independent. Yikes. Anyway, oh, sorry. Hang on. I have to use my slide controls. So this flowchart, I won't spend too long on it. This is just looking at Homeland Security and how that works. You get the secretary and then all of the various offices. And mostly I just want to say, remember, their job was to cut down on the bureaucracy. It's super ironic.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Can there be anyone, like,
Can there be anyone above the president? Back on that one slide you were just on.
So I won't say above, but equal to the president would be Congress and the Supreme Court as institutions. So, like, the president controls all of this, but Congress also has the ability to create these things. So, like, oh, gosh darn it. So, Congress has its own powers. It can create new offices, it can demand the change of, like, the mandates for, like, what the different offices do. It also controls the money. So the president can move the money around, but if Congress says nope, no money here, the president's hands are tied. The president would, all right, if you think of it like, if you think of the United States like a business, okay, the president is the CEO and Congress is like the board of directors. So the CEO is in charge, but the board of directors can still be like, we know that you're what you're trying to do, and we're not letting you do it. And if we really don't like it, they can appoint a new CEO and remove the CEO, just like a business. In a lot of ways, the United States is like a giant business, company, organization, Inc., Incorporated, USA Incorporated. Oof. Does that make any sense, Jackie, or did I just make that more confusing?
Yeah.
Okay. So, again, more. I had some more ironic slides here. Assistant aide to the deputy vice chairman of the committee to reduce Pentagon bureaucracy, because these things are real. This just kind of shows. I know this is really hard to see, so I'm just going to describe it. This is the executive. This is the president, and these are the different cabinet positions, and it kind of shows the hierarchy of power. The first four of state, treasury, defense, and Department of Justice. These are the ones that George Washington made, and they're considered the most important and most powerful. Below that are the ones from the 1900s, which are things like agriculture, interior, commerce, labor, and transportation. Super important things like general running of the country. And then these are like the 20th century ones. These are the newest. That's where Homeland Security and Veterans Affairs, education, energy, housing and urban development, human services. And you can kind of see like how like you can almost see how the nation grew. Like in the beginning, we needed to control the money in the State Department. We needed an army and we needed to create some laws. And everything else we'd worry about later. And then as we grew as a country, we started worrying about things like regulating agriculture and commerce, making sure there are safe working conditions. And then from there, we grew further, and we're taking care of veterans, schools, energy, housing, making sure everyone has houses. And so as America grows, like the level of bureaucracy grows with it. So historians like to measure how advanced cultures are by how complex their bureaucracy is. Like we like to look at them when we look at ancient African cultures and Rome and Greece and Persia. It's how we measure just how advanced they were, was like by how divided their bureaucracies were. People have opinions on that one way or the other, but it's a pretty common thing. So we talked a second ago about how Congress can create new agencies or control funding. So I'm going to keep going. There are these things called congressional committees. So these are committees that are beyond the power of the president. So Congress runs them, not the president. There are a few of them. And by a few of them, I mean like 150, which sounds like a lot, but it's significantly less than like that flow chart we saw a minute ago of all the things the president does. And usually they have a very specific function. CIA, NASA, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They have very specific jobs. They have very narrow responsibilities, and they answer to Congress. So if they have a funding issue, they have to go for a congressional committee. Usually, yeah, they're usually do their services. They also make regulatory commissions like the EPA or air traffic like control stuff. So like they've grounded all the super max Boeing planes because they were crashing. Or Elon Musk when on April 20th he just said he was going to sell all the shares of his company for $420. No one. What? Yeah. It's 420, and I'm going to sell my multi-billion-dollar company for $420 a share. He got in a lot of trouble for that. You can't control the market like that and say what you're going to charge for your shares of your company. It's supposed to like be based off supply and demand and be a natural market thing. And he was like, "No, I'm going to sell it for $420 because it's 420." And that got him in a lot of trouble with the government. I appreciate that y'all got that. I don't know why. I'm sure you don't know why it's funny. You're just laughing because I'm encouraging you to laugh. You don't know anything about it. Yeah, you don't get it. It's fine. I understand.
Yeah. No, I get it.
No, you don't.
Big Fred,
No, you're good, guys. They do. Yeah, those are. But they can regulate things. I don't have to beat that to death. What I will point out is that these groups are under the most pressure from lobbyists, which we talked about 2 weeks ago now. Because these leaders, like once they're in place, they ain't going nowhere, and they make the rules and they can enforce their rules. So like the EPA, no one tells the EPA what to do. The EPA tells the EPA what to do. So lobbyists are going to try and convince the EPA to see things their way. The last category that I want to talk about are what are called government corporations. And these are independent offices that are run like businesses, like the post office. The post office makes money. Amtrak is train services. These are public services that the government provides. So TVA provides electricity. They charge for their services, but usually at a lower cost. But they compete with a general market. Like you're not limited to the post office. You're not limited to TVA for electricity. Yeah. And this is my next to last slide. So the Supreme Court also has a role to play. And this is where judicial review comes back. Y'all remember judicial review, right? A long, long time ago, like way back in August, we started to talk about that. The different branches of government, the president likes to try and control Congress. And so Congress has its own committees that it makes, right? The subcommittees that create agencies that I talked about. The president likes to make executive orders to try and control those. And Congress likes to make rules that control what the president's committees do. The Supreme Court's job is to say no. More often than not, it's just federal courts. So you have the Supreme Court on top. Oh, no, go back. I can't. And then below it, you have federal courts that can answer questions. So it doesn't always make it to the Supreme Court. There are lower courts that handle things. They're called district courts. Yeah. They're also responsible for making sure that each of these government agencies treats its people good, and make sure that the laws are being followed. So making sure nothing that happens is unconstitutional, that there isn't any kind of forms of discrimination, that everything that happens is legal and tidy. So there you have it, bureaucracy. It's a mountain of paperwork and red tape, and we love to hate it.